Zaporizhzhia, Ukraine. Alessia Zadko clutched her stomach in the passenger seat, fluids oozing from a hastily sewn bullet wound as her husband drove through a hilly field in a flight from Russian forces. The Zadkos and their 9-year-old son were in a convoy of vehicles from their village, located about 100 miles from Mariupol, making a dash for safety. "It was a war zone," said Viktor Lapin, a neighbor who was part of the convoy. "We knew that, if we slowed down or looked back, we could be killed." The villagers had decided that they would rather risk death than spend another day under Russian occupation. Ms. Zadko recalled thinking, as she drifted in and out of consciousness, that she would never set foot in Ukraine again. 90 minutes later they arrived in the city of Pokrovka, to Ms. Zadko's relief. "I felt we would survive because it was ours, Ukrainian territory, Ukrainian military," she said. The Zadkos are now recuperating in Zaporizhzhia, a city that has skirted the worst of the fighting and has become a way station for refugees from the war zone. Along with Mr. Lapin, they recounted the story of their escape from their hometown of Orikhiv in late March. After Moscow ordered its invasion of Ukraine in late February, Russian forces moved with relative ease into Orikhiv, a village of about 700 people. But on March 23, intense battles erupted as Ukrainian forces attempted to regain control. Residents found themselves in a living nightmare, with explosions and shootings becoming a daily occurrence. Russian forces largely retained control of Orikhiv, but Russian and Ukrainian troops continued to fire missiles at one another from the towns of Malinovka and Novozlotopil. Orikhiv was caught in the crossfire. The Zadkos and many of their neighbors took refuge in their basements. Their only source of information from beyond their street was an old-fashioned radio that occasionally picked up a signal. Fighting would continue on and off throughout the day. When their roof was destroyed in the battles, the family moved to Mr. Lapin's house for safety. In late March, the Zadkos said they had returned to their home to feed their pets and collect some belongings when they were shot by Russian soldiers. Vitka Zadko, 53, was hit in the back near his spine and Ms. Zadko, 36, was shot just above her hip. The Zadkos said the soldiers had falsely accused them of working as spotters for Ukrainian snipers. Mr. Lapin, 44, heard their screams and caught a glimpse of Mr. Zadko sitting upright against a gate and his wife lying flat on the ground a few feet away. He ran out of his house waving his arms and cursing the young Russian soldiers for firing on civilians. Both the Zadkos and Mr. Lapin said that, while the Russian soldiers showed no remorse, they acknowledged that the Zadkos needed help. They gave them shots to numb their pain and took them in their vehicle to a doctor nearby. But there was little the doctor could do. Ms. Zadko's condition was critical, and getting her treated quickly and efficiently was essential. "I could barely breathe, and I could feel my ribs moving when I took a breath," she said. With hospitals bombed and doctors fleeing the war zone, their options were limited. Russian soldiers refused to allow them to drive toward Ukrainian-held territory and insisted instead that they get their treatment in towns under Russian control. After an hours-long search, Mr. Lapin and the Zadkos managed to find a functioning hospital about 3 hours away from their hometown, well inside Russian-controlled territory. The doctor quickly sewed up both of their wounds without cleaning them. "There was no anesthesia," Ms. Zadko said. "I was screaming in pain." When they returned to Orikhiv, Russian forces had occupied all the town's empty houses, including the Zadkos. Mr. Zadko and Lapin went back to the house so that Mr. Zadko could collect some documents. But Russian forces had found a Ukrainian flag and a hunting rifle in the house and accused him of conspiring with the Ukrainian military. Fearful for their safety, the Zadkos and the Lapins went to a community shelter in the center of the town. The soldiers would regularly enter the shelter and threaten to send the children there to Russia, angering the residents. Townspeople pleaded with the soldiers to let them go to a safer town for the sake of the women and children who had been living in fear for months. The soldiers agreed, but insisted that their relocation be to Russian-controlled Ukraine. At 7 a.m. the next morning, it was time to go. Mr. Lapin put his 2 daughters, ages 12 and 18, in his car. The Zadkos and their son rode in another. Ms. Zadko's wounds were infected, and she started to drift in and out of consciousness. The townspeople believed that her only chance for survival was getting her to Ukrainian-held territory. In a convoy of about 15 cars, a few of them pulling trailers holding more people, the Zadkos and Mr. Lapin set off, the Russian soldiers ordering them to travel toward the town of Lyubomovka and continue on from there. "We wanted to go to Malinovka, but they didn't let us in." "Only to Lyubomovka," Mr. Lapin said, adding that the local Russian commander told the soldier escorting the convoy, "If the townspeople move 1 centimeter toward Malinovka, shoot them." They took us to the first checkpoint in Lyubomovka and stopped us at the checkpoint and began to check cars for a long period, Mr. Zadko said. At the checkpoint, their Russian escort left. Without consulting each other, the cars immediately veered left shortly after the first Russian checkpoint, speeding up to get away as quickly as possible. Half of the cars headed west, the others traveled northwest. When the cars were checked and the line began to move, we immediately turned off, knowing the roads, and fled through the fields, Mr. Zadko said. We flew as best we could, he added. We didn't stop. For 90 kilometers, they drove like their lives depended on it. When they reached the town of Pokrovka, they spotted the first Ukrainian checkpoint. The entire convoy erupted in cheers and tears. That was when I knew I was going to survive, Ms. Zadko said from her hospital bed. An ambulance was called to take her directly to Hospital Number 9 in Zaporizhia, a city that has taken in evacuees, injured civilians and wounded soldiers for the last 3 months. We were quickly injected with painkillers, the stitches were removed because everything started to leak, Ms. Zadko said. At the hospital in Zaporizhia last week, Mr. Zadko carefully removed the brace around his wife's abdomen. She now bears a long vertical scar on the front of her stomach following an operation aimed at reconstructing her intestines, and the gunshot wounds are still patched up. It still hurts to talk, but she is alive. I still can't believe we made it, she said. I can't believe we survived.